Hello and welcome to a conversation on Daily Bern. I'm your host, Eric Miller. I'm joined today by a wonderful candidate for the State House in Kentucky, Adrielle Camuel. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
You almost had it this time. It's Adrielle Camuel, like
A-
Samuel.
Adrielle Camuel. Nice to
There
meet
you
you.
go. You got it.
Thanks for taking some time to chat with me. So you're running for Kentucky State House, as I mentioned, District 93.
Yes.
I just want to get some biographical stuff out of the way. Your website is camuel4ky.com. And I think your election day is November 7th, correct?
That is correct. It
Right
is
on.
coming up fast.
Yeah. I have noticed a lot of candidates don't put the election day on the website. I don't know why that is, but seems like it should be
I
front
don't know,
and
but
center.
that's a good point.
Yeah. So this is a special election in your district. And, before I ask about your district and your priorities and so forth, the reason this is a special election, the previous occupant of the seat, the incumbent, has passed away kind of tragically, Lamin Swann. Can you tell us just a little bit about that or him?
So I had only met Representative Swann a handful of times. He was elected in 2022. He was a first-time candidate then, and the 93rd district, I should say, was brand new to Lexington.
Okay.
When they did the last census, Eastern Kentucky lost population, Central Kentucky, Lexington gained. So they moved the 93rd from, I think it was in Pike County, to the south side of Lexington. So this was the first time the 93rd had been located
Okay.
in Central Kentucky. When Representative Swann ran, like I said, he was a first-time candidate. He won by 8% of the vote, which was pretty incredible. And we had been at a couple of events together last spring, right towards the end. They were fundraiser events for some of the constitutional candidates running election on November 7th. So the session ended at the end of March. We were at a few events together, and then by mid-May, he had fallen unexpectedly ill and passed within a week. He was young, he was smart, he was doing what he was made to do, like really and truly, like it was his passion project, and he was made for it.
Wow. Well, sorry to hear about his passing. Obviously, may you continue in his good steed, right, and
I hope,
win
yes,
this race
that's
and
my
so
plan.
forth. Yeah. So you mentioned this is, I think this is Fayette County. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Just tell me a little bit, just kind of biographically about your district. What's the makeup?
So we're the south. The 93rd is the south side of Lexington. Like, I'm going to draw a circle, like you know what I'm drawing. But it's a nice little almost complete circle with the center sliced out of it. So it was very strategically drawn when they did it, but it is a Dem leaning district. It has a really broad swath of socioeconomic diversity. On one side of my neighborhood, it is an exceptionally wealthy part of town, like it's Heartland behind the wall, like you live in the fancy
Okay.
part. But then you've got my neighborhood, and then across Man o' War, one of our main thoroughfares. It's supposed to be the city bypass, but instead it's got like 7 million traffic lights. But you've got some of the poorest of the poor in working class families in Fayette County. These are folks who are doing all they can to keep the roof over their head,
Right.
feed their kids, clothe their children. They're working 2 and 3 fairly low paying jobs, which is an issue to
Yeah.
So it's quite a diverse, quite a diverse district, and socioeconomically, but also ethnically. So we've got nice pockets of multicultural
Okay.
people living in the south side of Lexington.
Okay.
So it's a neat place to be, I will say. And people are really nice, but we're Kentucky, we're nice anyway.
That's great. Thanks for describing it. I do want to ask, obviously, a lot about policy is sort of what I tend to focus on, right? And particularly around the way you sort of describe, the other side of the tracks, if you would, right? Because I think a lot of what you're running on will resonate with them, and I want to get into that. But if I can, just a little bit about politics before we get to policy, right? So if I got the numbers right, Kentucky, the state house, like in 2020 was like 2/3 Republican, and now it's like 4/5, right? So it went from like 62% to like 80%,
It's
something like that, right?
it's 80 to 19. I hope to put us back up to 20.
Yeah. Okay. So
So
what is it? Yeah. So just talk about that a little bit. Just obviously we all know here. We all know that progressive policy resonates because
Mhm.
it's popular, right? It
Right.
favors the working class, the working poor, and so forth, right? But what is it? What is it like being a big D in Kentucky, if you will?
Well, in Lexington, it's delightful. When I grew up in Eastern Kentucky, so it's a even though, well, my little town is still pretty blue, and but it's challenging.
Yeah.
I've spent a lot of time in Frankfurt. Before the House went to Republican control, the Senate has been in Republican control for years. Before the House flipped from blue to red, um, we I felt like we were getting better debate, better dialogue on
Mm,
policies and bills. But now it's very difficult for any Democrat to get a bill pushed through. But also, it's hard
yeah,
to have good, honest debate. And I feel like without debate, you don't get good policy.
right.
And I think we're seeing that, the last couple of sessions here in Kentucky. But I will say one of the skills that I think I could bring to Frankfurt. I'm digressing a little bit,
No, no, no.
probably jumping ahead a little. But what I do, so I work in the elementary office with Fayette County Public Schools. I report to 4 chiefs of schools, 39 elementary schools. So I work with 39 principals and the families of about 20,000 students, 21,000 students. So if somebody is upset about something that's happening in a school, or they're upset about anything and it falls under the umbrella of elementary, they call me and I'm the one who helps solve the problem.
Okay.
So my job is to get everybody to come to the table and have a conversation, because a lot of times, people are people. And when we're talking about somebody's children, it's
Yeah.
very personal.
Yeah.
So they tend to want to shut down. But part of what I do is trying to open up the dialogue, try and get communication between home and school, or even the district offices and home. And I have a pretty good success rate, so I'm hoping that will translate into Frankfurt. And like I said, I've been in Frankfurt, for years, like meeting with different people, and during session, trying to argue in support of public education and
Right.
reproductive rights, healthcare rights, solar, you kind of name it, I was there.
Right on.
But I think it's going to take some patience, and it's going to take at least some people on the other side of the aisle who are willing to at least listen, to try and have conversations about. We've got a lot of like nonpartisan issues that we need
Right.
to address, like things that everybody should get on board with. And we can get into it later if you want. But like one
Yeah.
of the
That's
is elder care. We're all
yeah.
getting older, and we have an aging population here. So anyway,
Yeah. I
you're
do
doing
want to, yeah, I do want to ask you specifically about that. So it doesn't sound dissimilar to, I don't know how closely you follow it, but the Tennessee Three, like the Tennessee
Yep,
State House, right? It sounds
very similar.
okay. Yeah. So, yeah, we need folks like you in those seats fighting that fight, right? And hopefully there's some lessons to be learned from, what they're able to
Yeah,
accomplish, even minimally, but at least, from a messaging perspective, right?
yeah.
Um, So let's get into a bit of priorities and your legislation priorities and so forth. I do want to ask you, before we went live, you talked about sort of the challenges of running as a working class person, which I
Oh
think
gosh.
is an amazing thing that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. But let's hold on that and go through a bit of policy,
Sure.
because that's, I think, exciting, right?
It's the meat and potatoes of it.
Exactly. So the biggest thing probably at the moment in the headlines is, reproductive rights, especially in
Yep.
Kentucky with the total ban that was signed last year or whatever, right?
Well,
Uh,
they attempted to put it on as an amendment to our state constitution, a total ban outlawing abortion. It was defeated, thank
right
goodness,
on.
and I'll knock on wood for that.
Yeah.
But so my district, the 93rd, was 70.1% opposed, which
Right.
is phenomenal. But what I do know too is that they're not done. Like,
Yeah. No, no, never. Yeah.
the majority in Frankfurt, they are not done coming after healthcare rights, reproductive rights, LGBTQIA rights. Like, it's just going to keep coming. And I am 100% pro-choice. Like, there is, make no mistake about it. I like, I'm just sitting here just trying to even think of how to say it. Like, I will always defend a woman's right to make decisions about her own body. I think, healthcare and the ability to make decisions about one's own body, it is a primary component of freedom and autonomy. I don't think government or the legislature should ever stand between a doctor and a patient. I think they have no business making decisions for you, for me, or for anybody else. And another thing that's been in the news recently here is, Kentucky is second in the nation for maternal mortality rates. 37 out of 100,000 women who give childbirth die either during childbirth or within 42 days of childbirth.
Wow.
So we've got to focus on infant and mother care as well. But I mean, all of that falls into reproductive rights,
Right.
Well, bodily autonomy in general.
Yeah. It seems maybe it's that the defeat that you mentioned when it was a ballot initiative, right? But there's I think it's the attorney general that's running that has even sort of, softened his stance, right, in rhetoric, right? So, they know which way the wind is going. You hear, Republican pundits say that, if this election cycle is about abortion, they're going to lose straight up, right? Because they're not, they're in the minority as always, right? And policy.
But I think what happens in Kentucky, and probably like a lot of states with a Republican majority, or we have the super majority here, like or a super duper majority, as we like to say it, because it's tough. But in trying to satisfy the base and right to life folks, they want to throw the red meat at them to get votes, because in their own pockets, that's what keeps them elected. But when people are like, as a whole, like the state of Kentucky went, oh, wait.
Right.
What do you mean you want to outlaw it permanently? Hold on. You know what I mean? So he's watching Daniel Cameron is his name, watching his response to some of the ads that have been out there for this gubernatorial cycle. And there is one out there that is for Governor Beshear, about defending access to reproductive rights. It is so powerful. And I'll say this: my husband and I was getting dressed one morning.
Is that the one with the young girl that says,
yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, my husband Chris and I were talking. He leaves to go to work. He leaves at 5:30 in the morning. He rides his bike to school. So we were trying to coordinate our day, and that commercial came on. And we both stopped in our tracks and just watched. It was the first time I saw it. And from pretty much from that moment on, my phone was blowing up. Did you see that ad? And
Wow.
To your point, the attorney general is trying to backpedal and soften his stance. But the problem is he said he's
right. Too late.
all out there.
Too late. Yeah. And it's also kind of a meaningless, if you want to call it a compromise, or a meaningless concession that he's making, because, exceptions are essentially meaningless, right? You can't prove a rape within the duration of what number of weeks, right? So it's just kind of lip service to make him seem not as evil. My words, not yours, right? But
right. I won't disagree.
Yeah. So it's kind of a meaningless pivot, even, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that hurt him. That commercial, I think, really, I'm anxious to see what the next polls show as far as, in that gubernatorial race. I'm anxious to see what happened, but I feel like it really shed some light, and I think put it in terms, the need for reproductive care. It put it in a different light than most people are used to seeing. Like it was so bold and so honest and raw.
True.
It
Yeah.
was that was hard to watch because I'm like, that could have been my daughter, you know?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. If anyone hasn't seen that ad, I recommend go seeking it out because it is
It's
well
something.
done and powerful. Um, so given your professional history in public education, I know that's a priority for you and of great
Mhm.
import for you. Universal pre-K, investing in public
Absolutely.
education. Can you talk about your, you know, your wish to pursue those policy items?
Oh gosh, absolutely. I don't think anybody could argue differently that education is the cornerstone to any thriving society. Like without education, progress stops. And my husband has taught fifth grade. This is his 27th year. My sister-in-law's 24 years teaching preschool. My brother-in-law social studies, high school social studies. He's got 3.5 years to go. So my oldest sister taught in San Antonio. My mother taught phys ed. So like education runs deep in the family. But what I believe and my experience says is education really is the key to success, and however one may define success. But I think one of the best things that we could do for children and families is fight for and provide universal preschool. Now, when my kids were young, so you have to remember when my husband started teaching 27 years ago, I think his annual salary, his gross might have been 21,000 a year.
Hmm.
I was not earning that much.
Hmm.
He was definitely the breadwinner back in 1997, 98. And uh, once we had kids, like we couldn't afford 5 days a week preschool, but we also didn't qualify financially because we made just a little bit too much
Right. Right.
to qualify for federal funded preschool. So we did what we could. We were able to pay for our kids to go to preschool 3 days a week. They weren't there at the same time because my son was 3 years older than our son's 3 years older than our daughter. But we just didn't have the budget to do it. And I am married to the most frugal man in the world. But we did what we could afford. The
Right.
budget was so tight, but there are lots of families like ours,
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
can't afford to pay for a private preschool. And nothing's, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with daycare, but they don't quite provide the same, like, stimulating, thriving, rich learning environment that a preschool would. So we know preschools can help. It helps our local economies because it allows single parents to get, or whether it's parents or grandparents, kids in kinship care, allows them to get back into the workforce. It loosens really tight family budgets. It gives kids a leg up on their education.
Yeah.
And from the education standpoint, it is often the difference between prevention and intervention. So it's a money saver in the sense that we can help kids who may be struggling in some way early on. So it's an investment in their future, but it's also the start. And it sounds crazy to say it, but it's the start of workforce development. Like in school is how we help develop the workforce of the future. So for a relatively small investment, we could really do something to positively impact the educational outcomes of, hundreds of thousands of kids in Kentucky.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, I'm a big believer in increasing arts education opportunities.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, Not all kids are traditional learners, and not all kids can express themselves the same way. And I think the arts, whether it's, music or, mixed media, photography, whatever it is, like I feel like kids need that outlet and that opportunity to express themselves. I think we need more funding for gifted students, as well as special education. And then the last really kind of piece of the education part of my platform is mental health services.
Yeah.
And not just in schools, like it expands way beyond, schools, but specifically with kids, because kids coming out of COVID have a whole level of mental health needs and
Yeah. Okay.
socialization needs that we've just not experienced in this lifetime.
Yeah.
Uh, and so we've got to make sure that the needs of our most struggling students are being met. So that's kind of my, like in a nutshell.
No, I love it. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, again, you're working in the front lines in the school district is certainly going to keep you not only informed but well equipped to fight that fight on the state house floor. Again, let me just remind you, your election day is November 7th.
Yes.
Samuel4ky.com. I'm assuming that you don't take giant checks from like ExxonMobil and the NRA and
I
whatever.
do not.
So every dollar that you can send in to this campaign would be helpful, right? So
Every penny
people
helps. I can
powered,
say
right?
that. Yes, yes.
You mentioned it earlier. Let's talk a little bit about elder care.
Yes,
Aging in place. That's not something that gets a lot of attention policy wise,
it doesn't.
and we're all kind of destined to it, right?
Yes,
Unfortunately. So, talk about what that means to you and
sure.
what you would hope to accomplish in that
Well,
space.
I'm pretty confident when I say this that I'm not the only one in this country who is part of the sandwich generation. I've got my kids, but I've also got my parents.
Mhm.
My mom will be 76 in October, and my dad just turned 80. My mom, knock on wood, is in great shape, and my dad has dementia. And so I have three sisters. And between my mom and my sisters and I, well, one actually lives in Maryland, so she is not able to help us the same
Mm.
as the other two. But we all take turns, in the mornings, making sure my dad has his pills, in the evenings, making sure he has his pills. My mom makes sure he eats during the day, so we're back and forth trying to. I feel like it's so important for people to age with dignity, age in place as much as they can.
Yeah.
But also, it is incredibly hard. I don't think it's unique to Kentucky, but finding the basic services and healthcare to make sure his basic needs are met. And my dad is getting to the point now where he is not safe on his own. So
Mm.
we're in the process of helping move him to a personal care community, as we like to call it. But he is very resistant to this idea.
Yeah.
But we don't have enough caretakers. We don't have enough facilities. We don't have enough skilled nurses. We don't have enough beds. It is incredibly difficult to navigate the system to make sure that the Kentucky's aging population, A, can age with dignity, and B, can have their needs met. It has been really eye-opening, and it's why elder care, like, we need a social safety net, like, that takes care of so many different people, but elders fall into that. There isn't enough money, and there aren't enough people who can provide the services and care. Not that people don't care, we
Right.
just don't have the infrastructure in place for it, and I think we need to fix that.
So legislatively, you would pursue, investments in that area, right? Expanding
100%.
right
Yes,
on.
yes,
Yeah, I want to ask about wages, right? So, you mentioned sort of the part of your district has a working poor, right? And
yes.
that's not uncommon. Like you said, you're not alone in
No,
Kentucky in that regard, right?
correct.
Talk about your fight for workers' rights and a living wage.
Sure. I mean, I think everybody deserves a living wage. I don't think anybody should be required to work 2 or 3 low paying jobs just to try and make ends meet. And one thing I should say about Fayette County, we have incredibly high rent prices.
Mm,
The last time I checked, we were 30,000 single homes short for what the market demands are. So home costs are expensive. Space is limited. They've just expanded or they're working on expanding the urban service boundary to build more, what they're calling affordable housing. But inside the 93rd, like in my district, we've got folks who are paying really ridiculously high rents for what I think is substandard housing, and
right.
they are barely making ends meet. And I think
Mm,
we talked about it just right before we came on about, Maslow's hierarchy of need, and they are at that base level,
yeah.
clothing, food, shelter. And so I think it is imperative that Kentucky tie it to the CPI, Consumer Price Index, and work on moving up the minimum wage,
Yeah.
so that we are hitting $15 an hour and then eventually exceeding that threshold.
Yeah.
Um, and I hate to even say $15 is enough because it's
Yeah.
not.
It's not. Yeah. That's like
But
5, 6 years old at this point. Yeah.
it is, but we're in Kentucky.
Yeah.
And so we're not there yet. We
Right on.
haven't caught up with the rest of the country.
Right on.
And so until people, earn a decent wage, have access to insurance or health care, I mean, I just feel like their voices are just, they're not being heard and their needs aren't being met.
Yeah.
So my hope is that I can draw attention to it and maybe do something about it. Like if I
Here,
can
here,
get people on board.
here, here. Let me ask. When you're again, policy by policy, we just went through a few. We could probably do another dozen, right?
Right.
But policy by policy, these are people-centric policies that poll high, right? So when you're
Yes.
canvassing and you're knocking on the doors, tell me how it gets received when you're talking about policy that specifically will help them.
Oh my gosh. I have to say, the response to the doors has been amazing. And so the part of my district used to be the 88th. So I used to live in the 88th and I was redistricted into the 93rd. So I've actually been knocking these same doors for another candidate for 6 years. Um, and so people know me when I come to the door and they're like, no, she still has our vote, talking about Sherilyn Stevenson. And I'm like, well, actually, this time I'm knocking for me. And they're like, what? I'm like, well, we've been redistricted. And they're like, what? But they, it's the same conversations I've been having for years. Like the top things that they want to talk about is education. Sorry, my husband just came in and he was nodding at me. um, they want to talk about funding education. We have the second largest school district in the state of Kentucky, and we are lucky. Fayette County is lucky. We have a tremendous tax base so that we can draw on, but the state still, the legislature still needs to do its part in increasing funding for education across the board. But they want to talk about common sense gun safety measures. There is no community in this country that is immune to the issue with gun violence.
Here.
And they want to send their kids to school. They want to know that they're safe. They want them to come home. They don't want guns in their neighborhood. And it's common sense measures. Like, there are very simple things, and we can talk about this at the doors. Simple things we can do. We can do background checks. We can close loopholes. We can do red flag laws so that individuals who have a history of violence can't acquire firearms. And so the approach is really, we can keep our loved ones safe, but while respecting the rights of law-abiding citizens. And so they're all on board with that. They want reproductive rights. They want access to health care. Like it's literally meeting the most basic needs of what people want to, survive and be happy.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it gives you hope, that, again, policy by policy, those people are receptive to it because we're all experiencing the same human conditions and have the same, going back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like you said, right?
Yeah.
We all have those same base needs. The disconnect, and let me kind of redirect you to this, right?
Yeah.
So, the odds are against you in the state house, right? So first off,
Yes.
I commend you for going into a fight that is
It'll
probably
be a
not going to be
dogfight.
particularly winnable in an easy way, right?
No,
So
it'll be a
that's
dogfight. It's
amazing,
fine.
right? And that's a testament to your motivation and character. So thank you for that. So how do you get your voice heard? Like how do you translate the actual optimism and the policies that you are confirming are needed by your constituents into actual action in a state house that is stacked against you?
I'm a big believer in talking. Like I don't give short answers. you know, I'm not good with brevity, but I do actually think repetition. Like if you can talk about it and talk about it and talk about it, and like try and pull in one more person, try and get in one more person. And like I said, one of the members of the state house, Republican, like at work, if you could like draw a line between walls, we sit 50 feet from each other. And he and I can have conversations all day long. He's a terrific guy. We just disagree on certain fundamental things, but on some of these basic issues like healthcare, funding education, common sense gun safety measures, we're actually pretty close. We run pretty close together on that.
Mhm.
And so I do think that there are avenues we can take. Elder care as well. You know, he's lockstep with me in elder care. Um, you know, and so I think, or my hope is that I'll be able to just kind of bridge, you know, put out an olive branch and be like, this is nonpartisan. Like this
Yeah,
has nothing to do, this is not team politics. This is, hey, my dad's old and your dad's old.
right.
And you need to make sure that they're getting care they need, or your grandfather or your sister or your mother, you know. Um, and so my hope is literally by either communicating or over communicating, I'll be able to make some inroads.
That's great.
But I don't think it'll be easy. I mean, I'm not going to fool myself.
Yeah.
I would love to say, oh, I'm sure I can get in there and have like just the best bill possible, nonpartisan, and it'll get passed, but I'm sure it'll never get heard in committee, but it just
Yeah.
is what it is. And I'll just try again.
Yeah. But I mean, a mountain is climbed one step at a time, right?
Yeah.
Any win is a win here in this case, right? So,
Yes. Yes.
and every little bit, every step in that metaphor is going to be beneficial to your constituents and will have a human impact. So,
And hopefully they're, you know, representation of their voice. And can I circle back for a sec about,
please,
I
please.
might be getting ahead of us,
No.
ahead of you, in talking about like just learning to this whole process of running, because I've worked on campaigns. I don't even know how many my first campaign was 1992 with Bill Clinton. And you know, but since 2018, I got really, really active in local politics. And part of that was a function of my kids were a little bit older.
Hmm.
And I didn't have to be home every minute of the day. You know, when they got home from school, I didn't have to like rush home, you know. So, but one of the things that I have learned through this, and I have an incredible team, and this really is the truth. Like I like to, the way I see it, I have this amazing team of retired teachers, almost all retired teachers, who absolutely have my back, and they are like, so they're the team and I'm the candidate.
Right.
So, you know, and without them, I could not do this because I'm not known, you know, I don't have a well-known family name in Lexington, Kentucky, unless you consider like fifth grade circles, you know, with all the kids my husband's taught. We don't have money, we don't have power, and we don't have influence. And so it is really hard to, you know, to be a candidate, to run a campaign without name recognition, power, and money. It's so what I have found is the voice, like the actual voice of the people, is generally not heard. When I look at who is currently sitting in our state house, I'm like, these are just not your average everyday hourly employees. Like these people
Yeah.
are not punching a clock. Like they may have forgotten what it's like to be hungry or to be worried about how much money is in the checkbook, or, you know, making the choice, are we going to pay the heating bill, or are we going to buy the groceries, or we got to get new shoes, or, you know, whatever the case, whatever the expenses are. So this has been an eye-opening experience. And like I said, although I've worked on other campaigns before, seeing it as a candidate is really quite something. So I'm so thankful for the team. They're a team of volunteers that are, I would say, the best in the state.
Here, here.
For real.
Yeah. And hopefully on November 7th, they'll prove it. So even more so, right?
Yeah.
You know, well, before we went live, you mentioned, you just described what you described, and the word you said was exclusionary, right? So,
Yeah.
you know, the system is, you know, either by design or by circumstance, rigged against, you know, the working
The
class.
average person. Yeah. I don't know if it's necessarily was originally by design, but I think it's become by design. And this may seem like a jump to you, but I think that that's all part of Citizens United. When we have dark money coming in, it's all the money players.
Yeah.
Like I feel like politics has really taken a dark turn since Citizens United. I would love to see that overturned personally, but
Here.
you know,
Yeah.
I don't think anybody cares what Adrielle Camuel in House District 93 thinks.
Yep, of course they do. Of course they do.
Maybe not on the national level.
Well, we'll get you there. We'll get you there, right? And you're not alone, right? It's not me, it's us, right?
Yes,
So,
correct.
you know,
Correct.
so again, November 7th, Camuel4ky.com. You can like your socials and follow you. How can people help either remotely if they're not in your districts?
Well, we've got literally on the website, if you somebody clicks menu, go to volunteers, you could literally sign up to write postcards. We have an incredible postcard writing campaign.
Nice.
Donations, there's a green button right on the front that says contribute. Contributions are always welcome, and literally there's no contribution too small. There's some amazing people around the country, and every month I get $10 from them, and $10 buys postcard postage. It buys, we canvass with dog treats because we just disturb so many dogs. So if there's a dog at the house, nobody's home, I leave the lit and, leave some dog treats. $10 pays for a yard sign. I just had to I'm really excited. I just had to reorder yard signs because I had 202, which I thought would be plenty, but right now I'm 75 short.
Wow.
So the demand is there. I know yard signs can't vote, but again, it gets that name out there. Like, people see it. But yeah, contributions, they'll be starting phone banking and text banking, and all you have to do is click your menu and volunteer, and we'll take all the help we can get.
Right.
I'm excited. Maybe a little scared. Like, it's a little scary. This is something new for me. If you'd asked me on June 5th, would you ever run for office? I would have been like, oh gosh, no, but I'll help anybody else run.
Isn't that the Mark Twain quote that the person that should be president is the last person that wants it? Isn't that Mark Twain that said that? Right?
Oh, it probably is. It sounds right. But I'm like, oh.
So, yeah, I think that's again, not just blowing smoke your way, but that's exactly who we need in public service. Honestly, someone that has served the public, as a member of the working class, like I said, in the school district and so forth. But you're running headlong into a known difficult, if not impossible, fight for righteous causes, right? So
I'll give some parting words. I know I don't want to talk too long, but my dad's sage words of wisdom. Some of the things that he would tell us growing up. He would say, and by the way, so much of who I am is because of growing up. Like, it's growing up in Eastern Kentucky. It's when times were hard for us, our neighbors pitched in. When times were hard for them, we pitched in. It's just what you did. We would barter. My parents had a small clothing store. We would barter with our dentist. He would get clothes for his kids, and we would get our teeth cleaned because none of us had any money. Or if we had a good crop in our garden, we would trade out with somebody else. But Dad always said to my sisters and I, life is hard. He said, and you never know what someone else is going through. So it should be your mission every day to do an act of kindness to make someone else's life better. And I've kind of he's a great guy. He won't remember that he said it now, but
well, it resonates like a stone.
None of us ever forgot it.
It resonates, and
we never forgot it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's great. Thanks for sharing that. So, again, November 7th, it's a special election. So there isn't really anyone else necessarily on your slate that's running, right? Or is there?
So for the 93rd, so on my ballot, if you're voting in the 93rd, on our ballot, it'll be my race. And I'll give a shout out to Susan Lamb, who's also running so mine's a special election. Hers is an unexpired term. She's running for county clerk in Fayette County. She is an amazing woman, brilliant. We need more people like her in every level of government. And then, of course, we've got the constitutional offices for the state of Kentucky, from governor to lieutenant governor, AG, ag commissioner, auditor, treasurer. I'm forgetting one. Oh, secretary of state.
Right on.
So, yeah, we've got an amazing slate of candidates. Just incredible.
Awesome. Well, all eyes are on Kentucky, obviously, on the reproductive rights issue and more. So I appreciate, like I said, you raising your hand and diving into this storm, right? Probably it's going to be more challenging than dealing with elementary school kids and dealing with Republicans in the state house, right? Probably, right? So I made that same joke to Jamal Bowman when he was running for his house.
Right. It's okay. We're all people at the end of the day. And, eventually, listen, I'll say this too, like, I'm not 5 feet tall. I'm very short, but I am feisty and I'm not a quitter. And so I will keep at it. Like, I will keep at it for the things that will help Kentuckians. Because at the end of the day, that's what I want to do. Let me make life better for people in Kentucky. Amazing. Or let us. It's not just me. but let me get my voice there. Let me represent the 93rd.
Not
And
me, us. Let's us
yes,
make. I love it. I love
yeah.
it so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anything that's a priority for you that we didn't hit on that you wanted to just throw out there or make
Well,
mention
we
of?
got the, you asked me about workers' rights, and I did mean to say this because I joined my first union when I was 16, joined my second union when I was 48. Um, and one of the things that happened that really, I think, hurt the Kentucky workforce was the passage in January of 2017. They passed right to work, which is really right to work for less. And then they also repealed prevailing wage. So our skilled labor force took like not just one hit, but they took two hits. And
Wow.
so I believe that we have got to stand up for our workers. We need to repeal right to work, and we need to make Kentucky a prevailing wage state again, so that our workforce is they are earning a fair wage for the work that they do. Um, so I will say, like, we have our Andy Bashir, our current governor, has brought in, oh gosh, tens of thousands of new jobs, like really good jobs, really good industry. And in order to attract the best and the brightest, and to keep our best and brightest here, we need education, but also we need to be able to pay them what their skills are worth. So I'm hoping that that's something that we can slowly turn around in Kentucky as well.
Fantastic. Thank you for that as well.
Sure, thank you. Sorry.
Yeah. So again, Camuel for ky.com. Please sign up. Please donate. Please like her socials. Share this. Share her page if you know anybody in Kentucky, especially. Certainly spread the word. And I thank you for your time. Good luck on November 7th.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have a great night. Thank
You
you.
too. See ya.